It's Patricia Harris. I was born in Noonan, Georgia. I was raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I graduated from Howard High School.
Did you go to college?
No, I did not. I took some classes, but I didn't attend college. I don't have a degree or anything like that. I graduated in 1965. I was a dancer. So every production that we had, I was always in the dance routines. I was participated in a lot of productions, and I was a dance, and we used to also dance halftime at the high school basketball games and also halftime at football games. We had routines that we would perform out on the field, so that was my fondest memories. I did not participate in any sports. We did try to have a track team, and I went out for the track team, and but there was no girls' high school track team during that time. So my teacher had located by letter some other schools to get them to start a track team so we could have some competition, but it really didn't go. But I did make the track team, and we started practicing in the event that other teams, got a girls' track team together. But we never could find another school that had a girls' track team to compete. Oh, it was a lot of fun because I love dancing. I grew up dancing in my home. I have 4 other siblings, and 2 of them was girls. And we used to dance to pretend to be the Martha and the Vandellas or Diana Ross and the Supremes, just everything that we would dance, to music. Whenever we had guests, that was one of the things that my parents would say, y'all get out there and dance for your so-and-so, dance for your aunties. And so I just grew up dancing, so I really enjoyed doing that. My father's name was Glenn Cook, and my mother's name was Virginia. And they were both born and raised in Noonan, Georgia. And they got married, and I have an older brother that was born in Noonan, and I was born in Noonan, Georgia. But my parents moved to Chattanooga when I was like 3 months old. And my daddy, he worked in a factory there in Chattanooga and provided a decent living for us, as a family. And he ended up retiring from that same factory. Back then, there was not a whole lot of activity that we could participate in doing on the outside that much because of segregation. And so there was a lot of things that being as a black family that you could not do. So we did a lot of family stuff together. We had family cooks, cook-offs, not cook-offs, but family gatherings. Like every weekend, my mother's sister would come over with her children. We would eat dinner together. We went to church. We did a lot of activities with our church. And but as far as going out, anything, in the public or the community, there really wasn't anything too much that we could do. But in my neighborhood, one of our neighbors had a little, what we call confectionery, a little cafe that was built onto her home. And she had a jukebox. She sold food, hot dogs and chips and popsicles and ice cream. And so that's where we hung out. Coming up as kids, we would go around to, it was called Ben's Confectionery in Chattanooga. And we would go around there and just hang out off and on all day. She would put money in the jukebox, play music, and we would get up and dance, and we would sit out front. She had benches. We would just sit out front and just talk and just communicate with one another, basically. Those was what we now we look back and say the good old days. I remember my grandmother on my mom's side. She lived with us for a while. So she moved up from Georgia to Chattanooga, and she stayed with us. I vaguely remember her husband, which was my grandfather, but my grandmother is the biggest grandparent that I know. On my dad's side, his father remained in Georgia. I remember him, but I really didn't know him. Now, my grandmother on my dad's side, I never knew her because she died at childbirth. And my father was just about 5, 6 years old, I think, when she died. So he really didn't, really know his mother either. But, I really have fond memories of my mom's mom because she stayed with us and kind of helped spoil us along the way.
What was her name?
Her name was Elizabeth. Everyone called her Lizzie. Lizzie Freeman. I guess I probably was maybe around 14, because I'm thinking I was in middle school. I remember the sit-in demonstrations that happened, and I was in middle school then, so that would have been in the early 60s, because I graduated in 65. So my school that I went to did not really segregate until after I had graduated. So I would say it would have been the late 60s, when that started. So by then I was already out of high school and was out in the work world, working my first job as a fountain girl at Howard Johnson and, little jobs like that. So don't really know a whole lot about it, just more or less what you saw or heard on the news or TV. And we went to an Emmanuel Baptist church there in Chattanooga, and that's where I was baptized. And but my mother, it was like I say, 5 of us, and we all was raised up in the church. We used to have Easter plays, Christmas plays, and vacation Bible school during the summer. And I used to teach Sunday school as a teenager. I worked with the young kids and everything like that. So yeah, pretty much raised in the church. My mother is buried, both of them is buried there in Chattanooga. My mother is buried in the National Cemetery in Chattanooga, and my father is buried in a local community cemetery there in Chattanooga.
Did your whole family all go to the same church?
Yes. We sure did, until we, got graduated from high school and kind of started going separate ways. But now my oldest brother, when he graduated, he went to Morehouse College in Atlanta, and he's still in Atlanta. He ended up staying there, and he got married and started his family, so he lives in Atlanta. But the rest of us pretty much remain in Chattanooga.
How'd you end up in Knoxville?
My husband had a job working for Conoco, which was a oil transportation company, and they transferred him here to Knoxville, and that's how we ended up here, and ended up moving in a house across the street from the Foster Chapel Church, and didn't really know anyone because we weren't from here. And but I started visiting the church periodically until I ended up joining the church, and been here ever since. And that was in 1982.
How'd you meet your husband?
Through a mutual friend. I have a girlfriend, high school girlfriend, and her husband and my husband were friends. And I was just over to her house one day, and he came home with her husband, and they set us up to meet at a later date, and we started dating, and the rest is history. Been married 41 years.
What year did you get married?
In 1979. We have 2 boys together, but he has a daughter. He had a daughter that was 5 years old when I met him. So, she grew up with us also. And then we have 2 boys together. Yes, we moved in the house, as a matter of fact, right across the street from the church. Well, I really didn't know anyone when we first moved in this community. But then after I joined the church, then you start learning who was who. And I realized that most of the people here was related. And then I found out that they lived in the community. So, you know, you had some live next door to you, down the street, around the corner. So this was just a big community that just came together, you know, when they had in-type church service. So everyone just, you know, worshiped God together, you know, here at Foster Chapel.
Were you involved in any social activities outside of the church?
Not before I joined the church. And all of my social activities pretty much started within the church, because I was worked on certain committees, and we would, you know, participate in committees out in the community and throughout the city.
What kind of committees were those?
I sang in the choir, and I taught Sunday school. So we would go and visit the nursing homes, and you'll be surprised how just going around doing things, how you get to meet other people, and then you start knowing, you know, getting to know some of the things that they're involved in, and they invite you to things. Like my best friend is a lady that I met after I first moved here. And she was a nurse, and she went to a church. And so I started, you know, being invited to different activities through her, which allowed me to meet other people. So, you know, it just kind of like grew, that you get to know people and everything. But here at the church, I sang in the choir, and we used to we still have an awesome choir. Foster Chapel has always been known for their choir singing, and we used to get invited to sing at a lot of different programs in the community and other churches. And so we would do things like that, and that way I started getting to know people. They said, "Don't I know you? You go to Foster Chapel, don't you?" And things of that nature, and it just grows, you know. We have, every February during Black History Month, we have what we call Old Timers Day. And back earlier, we used to dress in just what our parents, grandparents would wear, and we would fix our dinner and bring it to church, and everyone would just bring their dinner, and we would just, after church, we would just sit around and just eat and share your meals with one another. Because, you know, when we was coming up, that's the way our parents and grandparents used to have church service. They would take their dinners to church, and after church, everybody would just sit and gather around and just eat, you know. So we would do that a lot. And then we have revivals. We have youth revival. We have a fall revival. And we normally would have guest speakers to come in and would do the sermon. During the youth revival, we would plan during the week a lot of youth activities for the, you know, to try to help, you know, get, you know, youth to come in and, you know, join the church. And the programs went very well. You know, Foster Chapel is just really a great church that liked to plan and, you know, pull people in, and they were good about doing that. So, I mean, we just had so many different programs. Every year we laid out the calendar for the following year, because we had annual events that we would do too. And so, you know, Christmas, you know, we would have a big Christmas dinner every year where we exchange gifts and, you know, share gifts with our pastor and members. And then, of course, Thanksgiving, we'd love to eat. So we always was coming up with some type of event to bring food too, so.
What event or time of year do you look forward to most?
With the church or just in general?
In general?
Oh, time of the year, I guess Thanksgiving, because that's when family really gets together and just enjoy one another. Nowadays, families are just so scattered till they really don't get together like they used to years ago. And a lot of family members move away from home and everything. So during that year, it seemed like that's when everybody tries to go home for Thanksgiving. So I would say that's my favorite.
What about in the church? What's your favorite event or time of year?
Oh, what is my favorite? Oh, I just like being in church. Because you just see people every week, you know. And like during this pandemic, it's really been hard because I really haven't been to church in over a year now. And even though we're getting ready to start back up, you know, it's an exciting time because you're getting to see, you know, people that you haven't seen in a while. So it's just the fact of just being in church to me. I have been the church historian for over 20 years. And when I first was nominated for that position, I didn't know anything about the church history, nor did I know anything about how to obtain the church history. But over the years, you know, you start learning things, and I started taking pictures of baptisms. And I would print the pictures off and give them to the family members for them to have as a keepsake. Then I just started building a file of baptisms. Then I started taking pictures of new members, you know, started doing the bulletin board, you know, putting new members' pictures up on the board so other church members can see who, and also the pastor can see, you know, who their new members are to get familiar with them and everything. And then every year we would have a church anniversary, and I would read the church history. And reading the church history every year started me learning about how Foster Chapel, you know, began and how it grew. And so then it just started being such an interest to me until, you know, I started like really wanting to help members to know and appreciate the history that was in this building. And so I would do things like get artifacts, and during the church anniversary, I would try to build it up around the church history. I would set out artifacts, and I would maybe like announce the deceased members and trying to say something about them to make their memory, you know, stay alive. And it would just kept growing and kept growing to, I didn't even realize how long I had been the church historian. So, but you know, that has just been a rewarding position here in the church. And Reverend McGee was our pastor for 48 years before he announced his retirement. And our pastor now is Joseph Tarbert, and he was one that we had a search committee, and they interviewed people that had applied to be our new pastor, and our search committee is the one that chose Reverend Tarbert, and the church, you know, felt comfortable with their selection, and we voted to accept him as our pastor. And we have not looked back. Our church membership grew, you know, doubled practically, and to where we had to look for a larger facility. And that is when we moved to Alton Road. So being a historian and trying to keep record of all the progresses and things that's going on with the church has been really educational as well as rewarding, because you get to see it, you know, as it's, you know, it's being done. We might had about 100, 125 to 50, you know, coming on Sundays, and then it grew to maybe about 200, 250. And then when Reverend Tarbert came on board in 2005, his first full year would have been 2006, people just started coming and joining and joining and joining till it got to where we had to sit. We had to sit chairs out in the aisles and in the back of the church every Sunday. And so it was like a great feeling, but it was like, where are these people coming from? Who are these people? It got to where you knew just about every one of your members until you really didn't know a lot of the members, you know, so you having to learn people all over again. And so it grew from, let's say, about 200 people to 800 people. So now we have, you know, probably more than that on the road. But I would say before the pandemic, we went to 2 services. We had an 8 o'clock service and a 10:45 service. But before we even started having the 2 services in the larger church that we moved to, we ended up having to put chairs out in the aisles. So that was such a rewarding and a grateful feeling, you know, to see that happening.
Do you know why there was such an influx of people coming?
Because people wanted to hear the word being taught. And I think our pastor, Reverend Talbot, is one of the best teachers of the word that you can find around town. And he has that reputation of being what he teach. And I think people appreciate him for what he is and who he is. And they really like being a part of, you know, his congregation. They hearing about word of mouth. Have you heard about Foster Chapel? Or you may meet someone and they find out you go to Foster Chapel and they say, oh yeah, I've heard about Foster Chapel. And I say, hey, come and visit, just come and visit. And people will come and visit. Like we had one family that their daughter is the one that got them coming. I think she came and visited. And she went back home and say, Mom, Dad, you all got to go visit this church. You need to go. And so then they came to visit. And next thing you know, the whole family joined. So they are members of our church, So we have, a congregation of great Christian people in our church. Well, I would like to say that I am a proud member of Foster Chapel. I've been there since 1982, and I haven't looked back. And my 2 boys was baptized and raised here. My husband came on board later in life, but when he came on board, he came in running, pretty much working. He's a deacon of the church now, and he also is the custodian of this facility here in the Oakland area. So he really enjoys working here, and just with us just being this Christian family together, I mean, what else can you ask for? Just being a believer, in the Most High, and having a teacher that is teaching you the word so that you can grow every day is such a rewarding feeling. I'm grateful. I'm very grateful for Foster Chapel and the Oakland community.